I'm Roy Schmidt. I was asked to moderate this session, and I'm really excited to do it. I have to confess right at the beginning, I met Gene a couple of times. I can't say that I knew him. And at the time that I met him, I was very deep LDS, and so Gene, in a way, was one of the bad guys from some of the things that I had heard. And sure, it didn't take me very long to realize that that was a very, very false impression. And he's now one of my heroes. So I just want to make that clarification. Welcome to Sunstone 2021, Symposium session number 361, Remembering Gene, a tribute to the legacy of Eugene England. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There's more than one way to Mormon." We invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing at sunstone.org. After the symposium, Sunstone staff will edit, polish, and re-upload all of this year's session videos to the Wahova app. It takes about 2 weeks for everything to be available. Once it is, every video will be available to watch and re-watch in the app through the end of 2021. Please type any questions into the Wahova app to be addressed during the Q&A, or if you're watching in person, we'll open the audience mic for questions at the end as time allows. About this presentation, Eugene England's writings contain cogent observation and commentary on many things Mormon during the latter half of the 20th century. His untimely death, less than a month before the terrorist attacks on the United States, has left a giant absence in Mormon thought and life. Come and join with family, friends, students, and colleagues of Gene, whose engagement with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the gospel of Jesus have been influenced by Gene's good heart, mind, and spirit. I'll take a second to introduce you to our speaker before we begin. Bob Rees, visiting professor and director of Latter-day Saint Mormon Studies, a Graduate Theological Union, is author of 2 recently published books, A New Witness to the World, Readings and Rereading the Book of Mormon by Common Consent, 2020, and Why I Stay, The Challenges of Discipleship for Contemporary Latter-day Saints, Volume 2, Signature Books, 2021. I'll now give the floor to Bob.
So, this is not really going to be me so much as it's going to be us. I hope that I will say a little bit, and then when I'm finished, I would like to. This could be kind of a testimony meeting of sorts, and anyone who wants to occupy some space here is welcome to do that. This is the third such session of Sunstone that I've organized in honor of Gene since his passing. And I just am hoping that when I croak, the rest of you will keep this this tradition going until the millennium at least. And then Gene and I will join you from that perspective point of view. Jody and Mike have come up with these wonderful pictures of Gene, which, do I need to, am I okay? I step in between here? Okay. I've wondered about what I might say, and I said a lot about Gene when he was alive, and even more about him after his passing. And so I just have a page here that I wanted to read that I wrote while Gene was still alive. So I speak about it's in the present tense, which is how I like to think of Gene. Eugene England is, in my view, one of the truly great Latter-day Saints of our generation. He is a Mormon for all seasons, a man who serves God, the church, and others with a fearless mind and a generous heart. Gene is many things: a dedicated teacher, a tough-minded poet, an imaginative scholar, an insightful critic, a believing intellectual, an intelligent believer, a devoted member of the church, a loving husband and father, a true friend, and most of all, a faithful and mindful follower of Jesus Christ. Perhaps no one that I know personally better exemplifies B.H. Roberts' definition of a true disciple, one who is not content with merely repeating the doctrines of Mormonism, but who, cooperating in works of the Spirit, casts them in new formulas. Gene did that, certainly cooperating in works of the Spirit and casting them in new formulas, until they help to give to the truths received a more forceful expression and carry it, that is the church, and its teachings beyond the earlier and cruder stages of its development. As Roberts said, there is a crying need for such disciples. One might argue that this need is especially acute in our day, when freedom of the mind and freedom of the spirit is threatened both within and outside the church. In his thinking, writing, and teaching, Gene always attempts, again, I'm saying this in the present tense because this is when I wrote it. Gene always attempts to get beneath the surface and beyond the apparent, to get at the roots of Mormon history and theology, on the one hand, and to imagine its ultimate possibilities on the other. I love that duality in Gene. His essays are always provocative in both the root meaning of that word, to call forth, and in its archaic 15th century meaning, to arouse to a feeling or action. Provocative. Gene always causes me to think deeper, to feel deeper, and most importantly, to act better. He has taught me to be more courageous, more tolerant, more understanding, more merciful, and more loving. I admire Gene for his courage, for his willingness to sacrifice his own comfort for the comfort of others, for his willingness to sacrifice personal peace for the peace of others, for his willingness to risk exclusion and loneliness in order to be obedient to his own inner integrity. As with few others in our church and community, Eugene England has championed important causes, many of them unpopular and certainly unpolitic. Whether organizing relief to Poland, demonstrating against nuclear testing, lobbying to save the environment, defending the defenseless, Gene has acted with single-minded integrity. He has been criticized by some for speaking out on too many issues, but who is to say how much concern and compassion one man's heart can or should hold? I must say also that in all of this activity, there was also Charlotte. While most people know this more public side of Eugene England, perhaps few know what Wordsworth called the best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love. If his speaking and writing were not balanced by such quiet Christian acts, perhaps some of the criticism leveled against him might be justified. But since he lives his religion as well as talks about it, such criticism is unfair. I have a strong sense that Eugene England will be appreciated more by future generations than by his own. It is an irony of some magnitude that someone so committed to the life of the mind and spirit as Gene is, so faithful in honoring his covenants, so devoted to the gospel, so Christ-centered, should be seen, as Gene sometimes is, as an enemy, a heretic, a troublemaker. Rabbi David Wolpe says that, quote, God moves between the poles of night, danger, and promise. I believe that those who serve him well and move between these poles, certainly Gene, as Gene did, certainly fits that characterization. Eugene England is my good friend. I'm proud of that fact and grateful for our friendship. I've shared more with him than with any other person outside my own immediate family. I've learned much from him and look forward to learning more. I value him as a brother in Christ. I love him for having taught me so much, for having set such a sterling example of Christian discipleship. This was titled Eugene England, A Brother in Christ. And the book I put together in honor of Gene, which I have put together in order to present to him on his birthday. I wasn't aware when I started it that I would not have the privilege of handing it to him as a surprise. It includes so many tributes from so many of his friends and admirers. That book is filled with, I think, wonderful remembrances of Gene and with tributes that I think he clearly deserved. There was something about Gene that was infectious, a kind of energy of soul that was contagious as well as infectious. Whether it's saying, when we're in London, you've got to see this play, Bob, and dragging me to see some play that I'm so glad I didn't miss. Of late night thoughts of Gene, I'm sure, to Charlotte's sometime embarrassment, dragging his whole family to our house to just visit and have such wonderful fellowship. I think of that term, fellowship. I think of Gene. I haven't read Terrell's new book. I just received a copy of it. But I think what Ezra Pound said about Jesus in his poem called The Goodly Friar, or The Goodly Brother, he says, I don't think they'll get him between the pages of a book. I don't think Gene can be gotten included in through the pages of a book. He was too large of a soul, too in some sense beyond his time. And I have thought many times in the 20 years since his passing how much we've missed his voice, how much we've needed his voice. I dream of Gene from time to time. It's always a pleasant dream. It isn't like the dreams that Brigham Young had of Joseph Smith, which I've never understood. That he just dreamed that Joseph, with his racing from place to place, trying to get done everything he had to do, that he didn't have time to really visit. And I thought, that sounds like hell. That sounds too much like this life. We're rushing around with not enough time to get things done. And my image of Gene, as I think I mentioned in the tribute to him in his book, is him fly fishing in some stream in heaven. And after doing so, just gathering a group of people around to sit down and talk. That conversation, the Anglo-Saxons had a term for it, umbesittendas, friends who sit around a fire and talk. That talking and listening and imagining is what Gene was very good at, and who left a legacy that, what I think Emerson said, was it every book, every age, he said, is the lengthened shadow of a person. Gene's shadow, the beautiful part of that shadow, is lengthened over our culture and over our society, and will be, I think, until Jesus comes. So my idea of this is not for me to talk more, but for me to give any of you who wish to an opportunity to come up and say whatever you would like about Gene. And I think we have about 40 minutes or so of time in which to do that. So the time, as they say, the microphone is now yours.
Thanks, Bob, for making this time possible, and Jody and Mike for doing the photos, which I think I've finished now. Several of those photos are of Dad in London or in England on some of the study abroad times that he led BYU students and then UVU students to either 6-month or 7-week programs where he got the chance to share his love of Shakespeare and theater. I appreciate what Bob said about Dad's infectiousness about you have to see this play, or and I sometimes think back, or even at the time, and thought, well, you can't, how can you, even if you're excited about something, you can't make someone be excited about something just because it resonates for you, you're putting someone on the spot. And I never felt like that wasn't okay with Dad, that his energy or enthusiasm about something ruined the experience for somebody else, or made it so they felt like they had to have the response he so wanted them to have, whether it was a friend like Bob, family members, or students. And it's something that, as I think of the things I learned from him, that I hope I've learned from him, that's the thing I think translates the most to what is my passion, which is taking people traveling and hopefully enabling them to have a great experience like Dad often provided for people, whether it be a Shakespeare play or a brand new play or an art exhibit and so forth. But he loved being over there, even when he was sick and had been maybe not completely diagnosed, but diagnosed to the point that he knew he wasn't sure if he'd be able to travel that May and June of 2001. I remember him saying, well, maybe I'll be better enough that I can go on the study abroad. That's what he wanted to do, even when he wasn't feeling well and physically was limited. He wanted to be, of course, with people he loved, but he wanted to do the thing that he felt so strongly made a difference in people's lives. Much of what's been said about Dad or written about is around his intellectual rigor and his liberal thinking in the culture of Mormonism and all of those very important parts of his life. And for me, it's Dad, but it's also somebody who taught me to see the world through art. My mom, of course, is an artist, and she taught me how to appreciate art. And I think one of the things I miss about Dad being here in person to do that is that infectiousness, that come along, be a part of this adventure, whether it's going to see tennis match at Wimbledon or getting into an unusual production, and then share how much that can change the way we see the world and ourselves and so forth. And so if there's anything that I like to do to show tribute to Dad of one of the things I learned from him, it's to share that with students and people on London programs. So thank you, Dad, for teaching me something about how to see the world. And I know those of you who got to be a part of that in any way, I'm glad to be here with you because it makes Dad alive for me. So thanks.
This is pretty cool. Thanks for putting this together, Bob. Was it you who put it together? Thank you. So, Gene died a couple of days after I left for Alaska. And it was an interesting time for me because I had been a very sort of normal Mormon. I was living in the days before the great faith crisis term had ever come to be. And I went up to Alaska, And there I was trying to learn how to write. I was in an MFA program. And I was there to write fiction. And I was terrible at writing fiction, which is why I went to get a degree in it, so that I could learn how to do it. And the funny thing was, the only thing that I could write was about Mormonism. And as I was writing about this, it just wouldn't leave me alone. I thought, great, I'm going to have to get a degree in personal essay. I started realizing that I really need to take what Gene had taught me and actually use it. And what he had taught me was the idea of being able to stay in the most painful place between two poles. You all know Gene, so you all know exactly what I'm talking about. But I had seen him do that, like in front of my eyes. I had seen him occupy the most painful place when there were two polarities pulling at him. And I saw that what he did was not go after, like, this has got to be the right one, or this has got to be the right one, but to allow himself to be expanded. The purpose of being there was the expansion of the soul, not to become more right. And I had to do that for a long time. I found that it took practice to let yourself be expanded in that way. And I never would have known that if I hadn't have known Gene. I never would have known it. I had such a head start. And so I wrote all these essays, published them in Sunstone and Dialogue and stuff, and I eventually do what I do now, and that has put me in a place where Gene's spirit has basically informed everything that I ever published in Sunstone. I hope you like what was published in Sunstone since I've taken over. But that has been the basic idea. Whenever something comes through, if I feel like, yeah, this is just going straight over to this polarity and they're arguing it beautifully, but it's not getting us anywhere, then I work with them to bring it to the most painful, expansive place so that we're in fact talking about something that is alive and working now instead of trying to show how right we are about this or that. And I also found out that it is a tremendously creative place. It is the place where things happen in the mind and in the soul. And it's not a place that Mormonism itself brought me up to be able to inhabit, but Gene did. And he also showed me that what I was doing was in the center of Mormonism. So I was really tempted a lot of times over many years to just leave the painful, expansive place because it was so much easier, and I wanted to feel right, and I wanted to follow a story that would bring me to a place so that I could say, this is the story. But he made me make my own story. And my brothers and sisters don't know what to make of me. My ward members don't know what to make of me. My friends don't know what to make of me. They say, aren't you out of the church yet? We thought that you were smart enough to leave by now. And all I can say is, that's not the most painful, expansive place. I have to go find that place. Otherwise, I'm not growing. And that's what Mormonism is about. That's what being alive is about. And that's what Gene taught me.
Anyone who knew Gene knew that he didn't give up easily on an idea or a project, or unless he didn't want to do it. But and one of our students on study abroad, Wade Jacoby, had come with our group, and we took early morning flight. I mean, we arrived in London early morning, like 5:30 or 6 o'clock, some awful hour, and you're in jet lag, and you're exhausted. And and then a coach was there to meet us and took us to the London Center. And so people, 45 students are dragging in luggage and finding a place to sleep and where they're going to put their belongings. And Wade said, "Oh, I can't wait. I'm just going to sleep this off." And Jean said, "Well, that's okay. You can take a little nap. We're going to go to a play tonight." And he said, "Oh, not me. Not me. I'm just staying here. I'm going to sleep this, catch up on this jet lag." And he said, "Oh, you're going to a play. It's Peter Pan." And that was even more offish for Wade, saying, "Peter Pan, I don't want to see Peter Pan." But Jean said, "Yes, you do, and you'll like it." And he just kept, he could have backed off, I guess, and felt sorry for this student who was tired. And we all understand what that's like to travel that time. But we were at the Barbican Theater, a big, wide open theater. And the first thing that happens is Peter Pan flies out across the whole audience. and Wade is just, whoa. And it was just a fantastic experience. And he kept this momentum up with the students to where they wanted to be where he was going. They wanted to know what the next surprise was going to be. And there would be many of them. And there were times that I had to kind of pull him back a little bit. One time he wanted to show us where he went fishing. We were all in the Jeep Wagoneer. And we got up there, and it had signs all over, private property. You can't go through. And he said, "Well, we'll just move that sign." I said, "No, we won't, Gene." And he said, No, it's okay. We can go over there. And I said, "No, we can't go over there. We've got a car full of kids here that are learning something from you right now. We are not going to take that sign down and go across that property." It was really hard for him to give in to that, really, really hard. And had I not been there, he probably would have done it. But I just felt like that was pushing it too long, and I didn't want the sheriff to come along and take him away because he couldn't obey a sign. But it wasn't just tenacity, but when he had a thought or an idea, and also when I would have one too, he would usually support it, and which gave me the strength and the energy to carry out some things. And he was very, he would recognize little things that were done that the kids had learned to do. And when there was a show, and many times, and we always went to Mark's openings for his shows, and I was taking classes at BYU when we first came, and a painting was entered in. It was juried, and it was in the student show. Well, I'd never had anything like that happen, so I was feeling, I was kind of downplaying it and a little embarrassed. And then some friends said, "We're going to go see this." But Gene couldn't stay out of the act. He had to be there, and with a congratulation note, and in a way I thought, wait a minute, he's taken the buzz out of my own experience here. But he just couldn't maintain that kind of excitement and energy for when any one of us accomplished anything. And it got him through some hard times. And after the surgery, he had to learn new things. He even had a student there that he had at one time that had to teach him words of parts of us, the elbow and just the hand, and because along with the tumors, there was a stroke, and he tried so hard, and I, was his cheering team and his coach, and to keep this up, it was hard for me to do because I knew that he was it was very difficult for him. But that was one of the things that I hope my family, my children will take with them, that they pursue something that is really a good thing. And if it serves people, and if you can think of the person's needs and stay with that and encourage them, that'll be a really good plus that we could learn from him.
So I'll do that. So I'm glad Jane reminded me about London, because so much of who my father is in the context of Mormonism, especially at this particular venue, which of course he's been so much a part of. And I wanted to tell a story about one of the most profound things for me about my father is his view of everybody being equal, which is really amazing in a religion that prides itself on being chosen and special. And so I would go to church and be told how special and chosen and the responsibility I have in this chosen way, and in some ways we're kind of better than a lot of the other people who don't have the truth. And that would be in such conflict with how I was taught the rest of the week. And there was so little judgment about anybody who wasn't a Mormon. He never treated anybody differently that wasn't a Mormon, wasn't of the same race as him or economically his equal. He was just kind and gracious to everybody. And we were in Russia, and this is way a long time ago before perestroika, and we were trying to get tickets to see the Bolshoi. And Dad went in and started talking to the guy. He was by himself. This brings up how you always wanted to be where Dad was. He went in and talked to the guy at the ticket booth and said, well, so if I could bring you a little beverage, do you think you could get me a few tickets on the first row? And the guy goes, I think I could do that. And they had these kiosks where you could buy the best Russian products, but only with foreign money. So the Russians couldn't buy things there. So he went, got 2 big bottles of vodka, took them to the guy, and got these great tickets. Now, that's not what the story's about, even though I thought that was pretty scandalous, given my age at that time. But then, when he came back to where we were staying, he didn't go find his kids. He gave them to the first 6 students he saw. That they were there as this experience. They just happened to be when he showed up, and they got to go to the first row. Another thing that really has struck me is I am a year away from the age that my father was when he died. And I am really young. And the sadness around that, I think that is the greatest tragedy for me. In a lot of ways, my son and I were just discussing how my father would be at this point in his life, how he would have handled a lot of what's going on in the church and what would have prevailed for him. But he never had a judgment about those of us who found the church was not a good fit. And I struggled with my faith from about 38 on, and I am so glad I left the church before my father died, because I did it with his blessing and his complete consent. And that was really a relief for me. Also, what I learned from my father is I am the one that would climb over that fence with the no trespassing signs without blinking. So I did learn that from him, because there were plenty of times my mom was not with us. So thank you for coming. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for keeping the memory of him alive. Thank you, Bob.
I'm going to say it all wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is that better? I'm going to say it all wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm always intimidated because Dad was so well organized in what he said, and mine tends to wander around. So I want to tell a memory of Dad and speak briefly on what Catherine said about climbing over fences where it says no trespassing. I did that at the governor's house in the state of Aracaju in Brazil to steal coconuts on my mission. And I've been doing things like that ever since. And I'm usually with somebody else who is a little bit more level-headed about maybe we shouldn't do that. I haven't regretted it yet. So I'm grateful for learning that from Dad. I'm also grateful for the people that I meet probably about once every month or two, who come up to me when they find out who I am. Some of them have known me for years, and then they finally make the connection that I'm Eugene England's favorite son. And they share with me stories of either having taken his classes or read his books or been on study abroad, and how meaningful that was to them and how it affected them so deeply. And when my father was here, you always take your father for granted. I knew he was different and unique, but you always underestimate the impact someone like Dad had on people's lives. And I'm grateful that I get to be reminded of how far-reaching his life was, and how unique his impact was on thousands of people. He literally lived Jimmy Stewart's life in It's a Wonderful Life. It was his favorite movie, and Dad lived that, as evidenced by just meeting people all the time who were impacted by his soul, his kindness and generosity and openness. And that's just wonderful to have that legacy to be reminded of. And me and my sisters got to be part of that. And we're fortunate to have that memory. Which reminds me of just went in and out the other side. Can't remember it now. This is something I think I can confidently say on behalf of my sisters as well. When Dad died, a huge hole opened up in all of our lives. Dad was a center of gravity that we all felt. But he wasn't the center of attention. If you went into a room and he was there, he had a profound influence on everybody, but he wasn't the one that was speaking. But we all felt it. And Catherine touched on this. One thing I think that I know for myself, and I believe for my sisters, that all of us felt from Dad was that he loved us and accepted us for who we were, regardless of how stupid and ignorant and all the failures we did and all the dumb things we did at college or in marriage or relationships, we knew we were accepted by him. And that's, the more people I meet, the more I realize how rare that is. I always talk with people who say, oh, my parents wanted me to be this, and they wanted me to be that, and I did this, and they didn't accept me, and my family didn't accept me, and they judged me and everything else. And all of us knew that no matter what we did, Dad loved us and cared for us and accepted us and would not judge us. And that is a remarkable thing to have from a parent that I always took for granted. I just thought that was normal. I thought that's what parents were supposed to do, and they are supposed to do that, but most don't. And it's one thing that I have just determined to exemplify with my own kids. I'm grateful for that example of him. And as Catherine said, he did that with everybody. Everybody felt loved by him and accepted and not judged. And they would come to me and talk to me about how I went and talked to your dad, and I couldn't talk to anybody else about this, and he just listened to me and accepted me and didn't tell me what to do and everything. They just felt love from him and acceptance. So I want to end by telling a story that is uniquely mine. When I was about 8, 9, my family would go up into the mountains above Palo Alto, into the redwoods, and camp out. And one time, all the scouts went up there. So it was me and my dad and all these other scouts. And I was a painfully insecure boy, just painfully so. Thought everyone else was more accomplished and smarter and everything else. And like any boy who wants to see his father as a hero, I naturally wanted to see mine as my dad as one, and usually felt embarrassed by all the silly things he did. And one night, we were playing capture the flag, and if you've been in redwoods, it's just pitch black. There's no starlight, no moonlight, because the trees block it all. And they divided up the Boy Scouts from the Cub Scouts for capture the flag, and there was this clearing where a fire pit was in the middle, and then it kind of dropped off on the edge, off into these huge redwoods and pitch blackness. And the Cub Scouts were on the slightly uphill side, and the Boy Scouts were on the downhill side, and they had flashlights, and we didn't, and they were bigger than us, and me and my friends, we'd kind of sneak off and try and get around and get caught. And at one point, it was kind of a stalemate. And in the center was this big fire, and their flag was over there, and our flag was up here, and the dividing line was right more or less down to the fire. It was kind of a stalemate, and at one point, I'm standing there, and suddenly my father bolted across the line. And if you know anything about capture the flag, it's one thing to get the flag, it's another thing to get back across the line. And my father bolted across the line and grabbed the flag and kept going. Jumped over the edge of the clearing into pitch blackness and just kept going into the blackness of these huge redwood trees and disappeared and shocked everybody. And the other Boy Scouts ran after him with the flashlights and everything, trying to catch him. He just disappeared and shocked us all. Like, what are we supposed to do with that? And an hour later, he showed up on our side of the line with their flag. He had run through the redwoods down this incredibly steep slope. And if you've been there, you know it. It just dropped off and went down about 200, 300 meters down to a stream. He had just hightailed it right through those redwoods in pitch black, could have run smack dab into a tree. And he just went pell-mell down there and went all the way down the stream and circled all the way around to our side of the line, and we won. And my dad was a hero. And what boy wouldn't want that from a father? And for me, it was a perfect example of how my father spent his whole life leaping into the darkness, the unknown, to find out what was there and explore that unknown with all sorts of unpredictable consequences of running into a redwood. But he kept going, despite the dangers. And he emerged a hero in all of it. Thanks.
I think we all have, as his children, these experiences that we consider just our own. And you would ask any one of us who was his favorite, and we each know that we were his favorite. And it's rare that a week goes by that someone doesn't contact me and say, "Your father changed my life. I am still here because of his influence," and he's been in another stage of existence for 20 years now. And so that tells me a lot that something that I heard him say not long after the surgery and the diagnosis, and we didn't know how things were going to go, but he was talking to a couple that was there to get some information so they could substitute for him a class that he was teaching. And he said, sometimes it doesn't matter if you have written things or you're a speaker or you have a position or are well known. Sometimes none of that will ever matter. Sometimes it's just about going fishing with your grandchild, or just spending time with each other. Sometimes that's really what saves us. And I thought about how he wrestled with that, as anyone with some pretty extraordinary ability would, to just be present with the sacredness of the mundane actions of being there for each other, and not always getting the attention, the praise, and the position that might come with effort of equal magnitude. I think of the experiences I had before that last year, when he was feeling something different, and in how his mind was working and how his thoughts were working. And he started a practice of calling each of us once a week and just talking directly to us, and like it was structured in, whereas before it happened because it happened. But those conversations were really interesting because it's as if he were taking this extraordinary connection he had with people to a deeper level, and that's what I felt was happening. And he would tell me what he was feeling in ways that were raw, and he would talk to me about not understanding why something would be painful or confusing to him. And then I would tell him what it was like for me to go through depression and to experience depression. And it wasn't so much that he was trying to fit that to what he was experiencing. He would come back to compassion and just saying, I didn't know it was like that. I'm so sorry I didn't know that. And what an example that was for me and the work that I do now, that it's all about sitting with and feeling with, not having the answer, but just being with, and how much that prepared me to experience God and insight and relationships on a new level. And the experience that comes to mind in another area that's deeply impacted how I practice so much of what is connected with my father, and that is my Mormonism. But I was only about 13 or 14. We lived in Minnesota, and he was branch president, and there was a call that came in the middle of the night, and a member of the branch, his sons had gone out drinking and driving. They had run a red light, stop sign, and had been hit. And these two teenage sons, one had been killed, and the other one was also in the hospital. And he had called and asked for Dad to come. And so a lot of times I had no problem staying awake late at nights, and so I heard the phone, and I heard Dad talking, and I went and I said, "Do you need me to go with you?" And so I rode with him in the car to go to the hospital. It was 2 a.m, and I'd never seen someone who was dead, and it was still in the range where mourning with those that mourn was a concept. But as we were driving there, Dad was really quiet, and I was kind of chatting about things just on that long drive and through the dark Minnesota countryside. And finally I just stopped talking and sat with him. And Dad sighed. And then he said, "Oh, Jody, if only people could live the commandments." And it kind of surprised me because I had a different experience with Dad from a letter of the law kind of experience. His way of emphasizes commandments was of love and grace and mercy, and I thought, whoa, what's this about? But as we got to the hospital, and here was this father and just destroyed at the loss of his son and the permanent impact on his other son who was struggling to make it. And I realized in that framing, this wish that we could obey the commandments had to do with not this shame or guilt or litmus test or list or worthiness or anything. It was just in the way that they can help us live fully. Can we realize that? And it took a few years after that, but it was like this opening of why there is this relationship of being asked to do something that could help you live more fully. A beginning of seeing that in any way that we have a relationship with God that's powerful is that God invites us to live more fully. Not to hold something over our heads, but just invites us to live more fully. And it was the beginning of me seeing that really the only commandment that really matters is that we love each other. And that somehow if we could get to that and forgive each other for all else, there would be no comparison to how completely our lives would be. And I'm so grateful that I could have a part of someone's life that could help me see that in ways no book could, no scripture could, no dogma could. It was an experience life that was really powerful, and I'm grateful for that.
I think our time for the session technically is over, but I would like to make an executive decision to say that we will keep this open for anyone who wants to be able to say something, so that it may formally end whatever machines are whirring to record. But if someone would like to come and say something, or if people would just like to meditate, we'll leave this open. In my article, my essay, Eugene England Enters Heaven, I had recalled something that I'd written about in a tribute to Gene that I'd published in Dialogue. It was on an essay that he had written called No Cause, No Cause, an essay towards reconciliation, which he offered as an olive leaf to his colleagues in the BYU English department. A tragedy that anyone had to, even do that. The quote comes from Gene's favorite play, Shakespeare's King Lear. Gene saw the scene in which the penitent king receives unconditional forgiveness from his Christ-like daughter, Cordelia, as perhaps the greatest scene in all of drama. When they are reconciled at the end of the play, Lear says that Cordelia has cause to reject him because he has not treated her. And Cordelia replies, no cause, no cause. I wrote, I've imagined Gene entering heaven. I see him reluctantly approaching Christ's throne. In my imagination, Gene begins to apologize to the Lord for his mistakes, his pride, his shortcomings, telling the Lord that there is cause for the Lord to be disappointed in his stewardship. But before the words are out of his mouth, I imagine Christ lifting Gene up, clasping him to his bosom, and saying with cosmic tenderness, no cause, no cause. Anyone who wants to come and say something, we'll keep this open for a while, and then we can close it. And do you have to do something formally here, brother? Are you? Just wanted to make a comment. Okay.
I said I didn't know Gene. I feel like I know him a little bit better now than before. And so I'd like to thank you for sharing your husband, your father, your friend, your teacher, and I want to say he's still teaching, because here I am sitting there on the chair, and all of a sudden there's a slide that says 84 Charing Cross Road, and I can't tell you how long it's been since I thought about Hawaiian Half, and I'm going to go home and reread that book. So thank you, everybody, for doing this, and please, if you want to continue to come up and speak, please do. I have to leave.